Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Monday, and a pretty boring day, I would say, for the major U.S. indices. Once again, just they're not really moving. Before I'm going to get to gold in a minute, which is really the star performer of the day. Well, really, there was two stories of the day. This is not one of them, or two movers of the day, different in different groups. So I'm going to break both of those out. I'm going to talk about today's option activity. But as far as the U.S. indice goes, it's been the same story now 3 days in a row. We come into the day, futures have a bid, and they get sold off. Not hard. I mean, it's just like it was last week. It just looks like there's some liquidating going on in equities. So it seems like, my guess is just a shot in the dark. From my experience, I've kind of seen this before. It seems like somebody's just slicing a bit of their portfolio and they're going either into cash or they're going out of equities, because you don't normally just see this, especially you could kind of pick up on this type of thing when we're in a low volume environment. But, to see us kind of basically drift up all with the rest of the global indices, we're kind of benchmarked obviously to what Europe is doing and what Asia is doing in the overnight markets. So for us to kind of come in for a third day in a row, and you could see this kind of, again, it's not huge, it's not a huge move down, but we give back everything that we just earned in the pre-market. And to me, over the first 2 hours, somebody is selling a bit of their portfolio. Again, just a guess, but especially when you see this, and maybe they're doing it over a week's time, because we saw this on Friday. We open up Friday, we have a couple green bars, and whoop, that's it. Thursday, same thing. Here's the market open, and we come back in. So, you know, that's pretty logical. I would think that somebody's got a decent amount of equities to sell, maybe a single stock basket that they're trading, because it seems to be happening in multiple names, and you can kind of tell what names it's happening in. You could see a lot of the higher beta names just kind of have the same type of pattern in the first hour of the day. So that's how equities are, and you can't really make any conclusions. I can't anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be people on on Twitter, or there's going to be people to make predictions in the financial media. I think you just have to wait and be patient here until we've got some type of a buy signal, which I don't see it, or a sell signal, really. We're just kind of chopping around, going sideways, for the last week. We haven't moved. And basically for all of August, we're down a little bit in August, but really not that much. Look at the Qs as well. I mean, the Qs even to the lesser extent. So, the Qs are right between some moving averages. The purple line on my chart is the 50-day. The yellow is the 5, and the blue is the 20. So you could overanalyze this as much as you want and say, oh, we're in these moving averages. I think you just gotta have to wait and let this play out. I've got the same type of line on my Qs, waiting for possibly a break above or a break below the 50, but we're right smack in the middle of the value area. There's just not a lot to really do with these names, to do with a lot of the high beta names. So I'm not going to go through the FANG names and over analyze them. They're all basically just consolidating. So if someone tries to do that in another video and and waste your time, so be it. But there's really not much to really analyze. Apple, I think, was a nice performer for the day. That one moved up on the announcement of their product release, which is September 12th. So got a nice boost off of that for a day trade, and then retraced part of that move. So really, where the action was, I'm going to get to the 4 minutes in to the video, but really where the action was today, it was in the miners. The metals and the miners. So gold. I've been saying this for if you've listened to some of my videos before, I've been saying that I've been waiting for a move above 1300 in gold. Well, there you go. You got it, and you got it with some conviction. Look at the price action. It built all over this, or built up right below this 1300 level, and then boom. Once we got through it, and it was the same thing in silver today too. So if you look at silver also launched through the 200-day moving average, which is the white line on my chart. And if we go through today's option activity, we saw some calls in GG today, Gold Corp. We saw some calls. We've been seeing some buying in a little bit of buying in GDX. Really, where we've been seeing the buying in this space leading up to today has been in gold. It hasn't been really huge orders in GLD. It's just been consistent, like 1,000 contracts here, 15 contracts here, going out to November, December. It's just been pretty consistent buying. So GDX also, if you look at some of these miners, they closed exactly on the highs of the day. So really nice, really strong looking. The trade that we saw today was WPM. This is the old silver Wheaton, so you have to remember WPM is now Wheaton Precious Metals. This used to be the SLW, but saw 7,000 September contracts. I had already put on my trade in this space before we saw the option activity. I went long silver, so I went long SLW in cash on the break of the 200-day moving average. So listen, these things are going to move together. Again, this is SLV, or you can look at you could look at the futures themselves, or you could look at the ETF itself. So this was perfect, closed on the highs of the day. So I will be long SLV, excuse me. Keep wanting to say SLV versus the 200-day moving average. So again, I refer to these all as easy trades, easy setups. If you don't know why I say that, I'll repeat myself. It's easy because I know exactly where to get out of this trade. If it goes back below the 200-day moving average, I'm out. So if we get like a whipsaw move like this, which could happen, you get a little bit of a breakout and a return, so be it. One thing I don't like is the how flat or how downward sloping the 200-day moving average is. But hey, I've got my spot to be long for silver. So those were all up. Again, GDXJ, which I didn't talk about, was up 3.8%. GDX up 3.6. So if you're still looking, I mentioned this in the trading room today. Those higher beta names, the FANG names, the semi names, I think they'll eventually come out of their nap right now, or they're all resting. Put some, what I essentially do, give away one of my tactics is I'll put some alerts where things look interesting to me, where you get that first move out of consolidation. There's no reason to kind of overtrade things that are not moving. There's going to be other things. I know some traders will have a tendency to kind of just look at the same basket of names or look at the same watch list. But the problem is if those names aren't moving, you really don't have much of a trade to do, and that's fine if you're comfortable with just a watch list of those higher beta names. Maybe you just take the month of you've taken the month off, or you take the last week of the year off. But I consistently there's always names, and there's always pockets of the market that will start to make some moves or trend while others are resting. So right now it's the gold miners. Last week we talked about biotech. This was the other performer. Of course, this was helped by a deal name today, but the setup was there last week, so we talked about that. I talked about this was one of the few S&P sectors or few groups, because it's not a sector GIC. It's not an S&P sector, but it is a group, the biotech group. We saw this MACD crossover. This was in my video, I believe, on Thursday, and I spent a lot of time with traders talking about, hey, we finally have something that looks like it's picking up some steam. So, you can look at this chart and you can say, hey, this is maybe a W pattern or a double bottom, but I didn't go long on this day. I went long on Friday. I went long on the dip. So I added an XBI call spread on Friday, and into some weakness. So that worked out really, really well, and something that in a market that's basically for the most part going sideways. So there are going to be those sectors or groups that are starting to make moves before other ones. You just have to be really observant and check them out, and that's what we do at Tribeca Trade Group. So if you're if you're a part-time trader and you don't have time to be in front of the screens all day long, that's what I do all day long. Is I look in a trendless market, which we have for August, and I try to find the names that are moving, and I capitalize on them. So besides a couple other areas that are on my radar, which I'll kind of leave with, and then I'll talk about today's option activity. But XLB Materials, not really a huge move today. So, up 15 basis points. First move into the value area. So this one, I may take a stab. I'll be watching closely around the open tomorrow. Again, this is the XLB Materials ETF. Believe it or not, this is not gold miners. There's not. I don't think there's any gold miners actually in this ETF. This is more DuPont and Dow names like that. A lot of chemical names in here as well, but you can see it does have an MACD crossover. It just really hasn't had the momentum yet. But still, now once we're in value, that could be your stop price. So, we only have this value area for the rest of the month. Once we get into this is a developing value area, but mainly around 50, right around $54, 54 and a half, 54.60, could be your stop price once we get a little bit further here. What else is on my radar? REITs. They didn't do it today. So, sometimes you look for setups and sometimes the setups don't materialize. So I was looking for a break outside of value, just like we've seen in utilities. I was looking for, another one of these groups to kind of catch, kind of a similar type of yield play that utilities are, but REITs hasn't been able to do it yet. So that one has to be shelved for now. So I'll cross that one off the list for now. But again, it's all about just looking for the right types of setup. So what do we see in option activity today? So I mentioned the WPM. There was probably about 4 or 5 names here that were really interesting to me. Gilead, I'm long Gilead, so not much to really do for me there. ITB was interesting. This home builder group has gotten pretty beaten up. This has been one of the best U.S. performers in terms of sectors year to date, but it really got beat up in the last 2 weeks and fell pretty hard on some weaker than expected housing data. But somebody came in and said maybe it's gone a little bit too far and purchased 5,000 of the ITB October 33 calls. A couple other, this name is interesting to me, CHRW. I already have enough exposure to the transports, so I did not take this trade today. But CHRW has a history of really doing bad on earnings, and so it's done this a couple quarters in a row now. But you can see that something's going on here. We saw call buying in this about a week ago, and this name's moving up. So I'm already long XPO, which had a decent day today, up 40 basis points after we saw some call buying in a couple weeks ago in this one. I think it may possibly some put selling as well. I'm also still long NSC, so you have to really be careful of your exposure. I don't want to have that many names in the same sector. I like to have some exposure to transports right now, but obviously they're kind of a troubled area. So there's some dip buying for me is okay, but I don't want to have a whole portfolio of transport names. Viacom, we've seen some call buying now a couple times now. I think there was some on Friday. I'm going from memory, but this is a name that it's well in a downtrend. So if you play these names, I always will look to kind of play these as a day trade. Names that are in a big downtrend or maybe a 1 day holding period. I just don't like to play that many counter trend trades. Something that's this is in a downtrend. Let's face it. But it's twice where we've seen some calls go up in this name. Nice little order in McDonald's today. It was a small order in terms of contract size, 500, but it was a decent sized trade in Mickey D's. Let's see if I can find the actual sweep. 500. They did these for $10. So, $500,000 trade. So only 500 contracts. Maybe they're trying to fly underneath the radar and go way in the money. Could also be a stock replacement for something like that. Caught my eye earlier. UFS. So I would put this in top 5 trades of the day. UFS. This is Domtar. This is a paper company. So I did take this trade today. This is the October. Now, granted, it's going to need a big move in a small amount of time. So, when you see this type of trade where the delta is about 25, put the trade on accordingly, because you look at the price and it's like, okay, wow, that's pretty cheap, but it needs, for a name that typically doesn't move that much, it's going to need a big move in a short amount of time. Now, it's did top out at $44, also at 42, but 42 and a half is the strike. So, the price is going to need to get up here just to get the delta to, about 50. So, I do like the that it's unusual. We don't see a lot of activity in this one. I do like the aggressiveness, but it's going to need a big move. THC, this is another one that, in my opinion, anything under than $20 you could play as a day trade. You don't have to mess with this, but this thing has run all the way up. If you remember, THC got absolutely smoked in about a month's time, from July to August, and actually a little bit less than a month. I mean, it went from $20 down to 13. Really, got spanked. But buyers have been coming in. Perhaps this thing got a little bit too cheap. Another big momentum day in this name, where basically, I think the calls came in sometime around 11:30 today. But even if you bought the stock at 1687 and wrote it up to 1748. Another name that did this today was CBI. The break of the value area right at 1135, and these things move very quickly. Again, I don't mess with the options in these names, because the implied volatility is just way too high. It's easier just to buy the stock outright in these names that are under $20. Speaking of cheap names, another name that saw repeat activity was Glue. Not a name. I really don't understand why anybody would buy options in this. Just buy the stock. It's a $3.50 option price. So, I'm sure there's a reason for this. They can only lose $144,000, but why even mess with the options? Why not just buy a 340, a penny stock? But in any event, it was there. Sarepta, some small calls. As I mentioned, biotech was really well bid today. So when you have the momentum like this today, this was right around midday, where they just, again, it was a small order in Sarepta, but it doesn't take much when there's strong momentum in a sector to get this thing going. So you could see it's still trading up after hours, up to 38.44. It looks like on light volume. Just a couple other quick trades. Really high speculative names. We've seen these go up before. QEP, WPX. I'm not even going to pull up the charts. They haven't worked. So who knows? Maybe it works this time. But we've seen just boatloads of QEP and WPX calls go up before, and it's amounted to diddly squat. So it's not worth the time for me to even go over. If it works out, then shame on me for not looking at it. But I mean, these things have been huge money losers. So it is what it is, and they're both in downtrends. And I don't like to trade this kind of paper in downtrends, especially when they've bought these numerous times before and it's stunk up the place. One final trade is ePay, not eBay. ePay is another name like ADP. Right, ADP, automatic data processing, paychecks. So I like the chart in this thing. They actually rebooked a trade. There was over 5,000 contracts, and they canceled 4,200 of them. Nevertheless, I think the chart looks pretty good. You've got this VPOC here, which is another example of hitting a VPOC and reverting, but it's in a nice little uptrend. It does need to take out this 31.35 level, but just looking closer and forgetting about that resistance, you got the price right above the value area, and it's not real extended. You can see the moving averages have crunched. You could see a hammer right on the moving averages, which I like to see. So that's the last trade of the day. So thanks for watching today's video. Have a great night. See you back tomorrow morning, Tuesday. Thanks.